Hello again, everyone. I am Chris Shura, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for Friday, September 23rd, 2022. Justin Ritzel, Robert Harding are joining me. I'm in our new offices here on Seminary Street, and I guess I'm in an echo chamber, so I will try to hopefully keep the audio as good as possible, but it's going to be tough. And so anyways, we're going to do some NFL picks. We're going to talk about the NFL a little bit. We'll go to the picks first, okay? So last week we all went 1-3, and Robert is still the leader at 5-3, and Justin and I are each 4-4. And yeah, it's a tough slog, no doubt about it. So let's get right to it. Our first game is not arguably, it is. This is the biggest game of the week in the NFL. There's no debate. It's Dolphins Bills. Yeah, 2-0 Bills, 2-0 Dolphins. Oh yeah. Not going to engage in any trash talking or anything like that. That's not me. I have to admit, I'm very, very happy the way the Dolphins played on Sunday. I thought for sure they were going to get demolished, and as Robert and Justin know, I tweeted something that turned into something else. The next thing you know, I'm getting my tweets read on Good Morning Football. But irregardless, Dolphins played an amazing fourth quarter, 4 touchdowns, 6 TD passes last week. Meanwhile, the Bills, I mean, they're a steamroller. Much respect to the Bills. They absolutely demolished the Titans on Monday Night Football. Josh Allen is your early MVP, no doubt about it. And as Robert will be first to tell you, the Bills have owned the Dolphins recently. 7 straight wins over Miami, and none of these games really have been close. They've all been blowouts, basically. I think maybe there was one game that was decided by a field goal, but they've all been blowouts. So the big question is, can the Dolphins hang in there? They're 5.5-point underdogs at home. Can they hang in there and cover the spread or possibly pull off the upset? And unfortunately, I'm here to say no. I'm picking Buffalo to cover the spread, unfortunately. I hate doing it, but I have to. And let me tell you why. Okay, so a lot of people are making a big deal about the Bills' injuries in their backfield, their secondary, their defensive backfield. To me, the key is the Bills' pass rush. Because if you remember last year's game in Miami, they knocked out Tua the first quarter with broken ribs. And yes, the Dolphins' offensive line is much improved from last year, absolutely. But I still think they're going to get pressure on Tua, which is going to be huge. And the other thing is, I think they're going to stop Miami's running game. And I think with those 2 factors at hand, I think that's going to be the key for Buffalo. Their defense is going to be able to stop the Dolphins enough to win the game. Now, offensively, the Dolphins have had some injuries. And Xavier Howard was on the injured report with a groin injury. And you could kind of tell on Sunday's game against the Ravens that he wasn't 100%. There were some plays where you could tell that he was kind of like not running full tilt. So the Dolphins have some injuries too on their defensive backfield. So I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think this is going to be like a 35-21 game. But I just think that the Bills' defense this game, and I hate to do it. I hate to pick against my Dolphins, but the 5.5. I mean, it's.
All right. See you later, Chris. Robert, I'll go next. I mean, Chris pointed out this run of Bills Dolphins games that's been incredibly one-sided in the Bills' favor, but that's not just the Bills Dolphins thing. I mean, you know this. The Bills have not won a game by less than 10 points, dating back to their playoff win over the Colts back in 2020. Technically, it was January 2021, but the 2020 season. So we're getting on a year and a half of that. When the Bills win, which they do a lot of, they tend to win big. They have shown so far this year, they are the dynamic Super Bowl favorite that everyone pegged them as. I mean, I think there are certainly reasons to be down on both the Rams and the Titans going into this year. The Bills' first two opponents. I've made my stance on the Rams pretty clear, and the Titans are operating without three of their four best players that they had the last couple of years as far as their kind of core. They traded AJ Brown. Derrick Henry looks like a shell of himself. So, I'm not going to say that this game is the Bills' biggest test of the season thus far, but I don't see a path necessarily for the Dolphins to cover this game. I think the Bills are that dynamic. Really, the only thing is where you look at the matchups and say, hey, maybe this favors the Dolphins a little bit, is that banged up Bills secondary, because the strength of the Dolphins is Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So, but are they going to perform to the level they did last week again this week? Like, that was just an unbelievable comeback by the Dolphins. I don't see it. I think the Bills they're not a team I'm going to bet against anytime soon. They taught me my lesson week one, so I'm going to ride with Buffalo.
Yeah, my thing about this game is, there's a lot of stock being put into what the Dolphins are doing. This season, they're 2-0. Look, they beat up the Patriots. The Patriots don't look too good. I mean, they barely beat the Steelers last week. So, the Patriots, I think they're kind of in this, like, I don't want to say rebuilding phase or whatever, but they're clearly not their old selves. And then that Ravens game was just absurd. The Ravens were up 35-14 going into the fourth quarter. A massive choke job by the Ravens in that one. I mean, Lamar Jackson looked fantastic. That big touchdown run, they go up 3 touchdowns near the end of the third quarter and then just fall apart. Like, it looks like they didn't even know how to play defense. Tua's out there throwing like he's playing against some fourth stringers in the preseason. And he's throwing darts to Waddle and Hill, and they're scoring these long touchdowns. The highlights were absurd. So that takes me to this point. There's a lot of hype about the Dolphins. They're 2-0. Oh, Tua, look at all these yards. Maybe he's the MVP, all this other stuff. He's played one good quarter. Okay, one good quarter. One good quarter doesn't make a season, folks. They should have lost the game against the Ravens. And let's not forget that Dolphins win over the Patriots. The offense only scored one of those touchdowns. The other was scored by the defense. So, let's pump the brakes a little bit on the Dolphins. I think that this will be the test. And look, the Bills, Chris mentioned this, they do have some injuries. Basically the entire starting secondary is out. Trey White was already out because he's rehabbing the ACL injury. Dane Jackson, who was the number 2 corner, but now the number 1 with White out, he's going to miss some time with a neck injury. Micah Hyde's out with a neck issue of his own. And Jordan Poyer, he's questionable for Sunday, but it sounds like if he does play, he might not play the whole game. So, it's going to be a test for, the Bills back end, but, Chris even had to admit this, the Bills pass rush is formidable. And especially with Von Miller up there, I think that'll help. They've got a solid linebacking core as well. So that'll take away the middle of the field. Really the question is, will they be able to, stop those deep shots? Tyreek Hill just blowing right down the field. That's going to be the big test. But other than that, I'm not too worried about the defensive side of the ball because we have Josh Allen. Okay, he's not hurt in this game, and the Bills. I think even if their defense gives up 30, the Bills can score 31 plus. So I'm not worried about that. Give me the Bills to cover this one. It sounds like we're all in agreement here that the Dolphins are pretenders and the Bills will continue their reign.
Yeah, I obviously had some technical difficulties there. Sorry about that. Did Justin make his pick already?
Yes, he's riding the Bills.
Yeah, I assume I'll have to watch the replay to see what he said. All right, let's go to the next game. It's actually Justin's Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks are 1.5 point favorite. I like the Packers in this game. I know that the Bucks are kind of banged up on the offensive line. They're missing Evans, one of their top wide receivers. The Packers, I think that getting that great win against the Bears last week was kind of got them going. And I like Aaron Rodgers to win this game. And I think the Packers can win it outright. They'll definitely cover the 1.5. I think the Packers have the defense to be able to slow down Brady a little bit, especially with the injuries we just discussed, everything else. So I'm going with Green Bay. Robert, who do you like?
This is a tough one because it's really hard to make figure out how good or bad these two teams are. The Packers, I thought, played a solid game against the Bears on Sunday night. You really got to see the two-headed monster of Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Rodgers played I think an efficient game. It's not like he lit up the stat sheet, but he looked back to his old self. Maybe got a little psychedelics between weeks there, who knows. But so there's that. But then the Buccaneers, they obviously scraped by the Saints largely by the defense, because Brady I don't know, maybe Giselle's in his head. Who knows what's happening there. He doesn't look like his old self, or even the quarterback that we saw last year who put up some big numbers. So this is a tough one, but there's some history here. I believe this game is in Tampa. We all know how Rodgers plays when he heads down south. That there tends to be some struggles there, and the Bucs defense, say what you want about the offense and their struggles, but that defense is held up through the first 2 weeks. They look pretty tough. They certainly gave the Saints fits. They did get a touchdown last week, and we saw what they did against the Cowboys. So I think this will be a pretty tough game, low scoring game too, between these two teams. But I'm gonna ride with the home team here. I'm gonna go with the Bucs.
All right, Justin, who you picking?
The timing of this game makes me kind of sad, because I feel like this should have been like a November game, because we're talking about two teams that are, the Packers are transitioning on their offense. Like, Rodgers is still kind of trying to figure stuff out with his new receivers, and then the Buccaneers are just so banged up on offense, within their receiver position. Chris Godwin's not going to play. Julio Jones is, who knows what's up with him. He's hurt already. Mike Evans is suspended. And then they have a lot of guys missing on their offensive line. So this is going to be a game that is probably going to be dictated by which defense plays better. And, I hate to say it, but I don't trust the Packers defense. Like, they just have these games or these sequences of games, even last week, where, yes, overall, they dominated the Chicago Bears. I mean, the Bears went 3 and out. Like, Justin Fields attempted 11 passes. The Bears only ran 41 plays. Like, you would take that any day of the week. But, and this is how the Packers defense has always been, even when they're good. They always have those 1 or 2 drives where they just kind of take their foot off the gas and let the other team go down the field. And normally it ends in points. Now, they got the benefit of a good call because Justin Fields was deemed to have been stopped at the 1-inch line. But, I just don't have quite the faith in them, especially after whatever the hell that game plan was week 1. You got to show me you can be a dominant defense. That's, I know we're only in week 3 here, and they were hyped up all off season. You got to show me that you can shut down a formidable quarterback, which even with his age and even how he's looked so far this year, I still think Tom Brady, with his intelligence, presents some issues for the Packers. They're not going to throw anything at him that he hasn't seen. So from that standpoint, I just trust the Tampa Bay defense to give the Packers some problems, especially if Rodgers is not going to throw to his young guys and not going to trust his offense, which is kind of what he tends to do when he's not seeing the field. And then Robert mentioned it. He stinks in the state of Florida. For whatever reason, whenever he goes down, really when the Packers go down to Florida, it always seems to be this time of year, it's September, maybe early October. It's really hot and humid. and they just lay an egg on offense. So, he has thrown 3 pick sixes in his career, which is an amazing stat. 2 of them have come in this stupid stadium in Tampa Bay at Raymond James with that stupid pirate ship out in, the concourse. He just doesn't play well at this stadium and in this state. So, I don't feel great about either offense right now, but I think Tampa Bay's defense is probably going to win this game. I'll take Tampa Bay.
Wow. A little surprised there. All right. Our next game.
You picked against your own team too. Calm down.
Yeah, but come on. There's a difference between the Bills and the Bucs. Give me a break.
What a bum.
Yeah, the Bucs have won a Super Bowl.
A couple of years ago, true. All right, Rams and the Cardinals. Rams are 3.5-point favorites. Seems like they're getting their stuff together again. The Cardinals, what a great comeback on the road against Las Vegas. The Raiders, as Robert would say. But I think that really speaks more about the Raiders than it does the Cards. And the Cards looked horrible in week 1 against Kansas City. The Rams, I think, are starting to get their act together. Division game, opponents know each other. I know Robert loves it when I throw in those cliches. I'm going with the Rams to cover the 3.5. I like LA to win the game and cover the 3.5. Go ahead, Justin. Who do you like in this game?
I don't know how you can say the Rams look like they're getting their stuff together. They almost blew a giant lead to the Atlanta Falcons, who are like a contender for the worst record in the league. I think the Rams stink, and I think the Cardinals, who are Robert's NFC Super Bowl pick, if I remember correctly, they're a Jekyll and Hyde team to me. Like they can look absolutely miserable in one quarter, and then they look like the best offense in football the next. Like, and Kyler Murray, like the swing of his play is it's unbelievable. So this is like a toss-up game for me. So I'm gonna say the same thing I said last week when we picked the Dolphins and the Ravens. I don't really know, so I guess I'll take the points. I'll take those 3.5 if they're giving the Cardinals, but I don't feel great about it. I watched that playoff game last year when the Rams totally embarrassed Kyler Murray. So I don't know. Like I'll take the Cardinals, I guess, but I don't feel good about it at all.
All right, Robert.
I'm riding with the Rams despite their near choke job against the Falcons last week. The Cardinals, to Justin's point, the Cardinals are just too inconsistent. This is kind of the hallmark of the Kyler Murray era, that like he can have these like big moments in a game or these big games, and then the next week or the next drive or whatever, he looks like a totally different player and stinks. So I can't trust him here, until he shows me something, and that's consistency. With the Rams, you know what you're getting. This team, I think, is, they're going to go heavy with Cooper Kupp. They're hopefully going to get some of these other guys involved, the Allen Robinsons of the world. And then let's see that defense, play up to their standard, and get that going. So, and I think that this is a good game for them to do it. They're familiar with the Cards, one of the Shearisms here, the divisional game. So the Rams, know what they're getting into with the Cardinals here, and they've had their number a bit. So I'll take the Rams in this one.
All righty, our last game, the San Francisco 49ers, 1.5-point favorites at the Denver Broncos. Yeah, this is a fun game. You got Jimmy Garoppolo, who is now going to be the starter for the rest of the season, health permitting. And the Broncos, which just can't seem to get their offense on track with Russell Wilson. They really have struggled. They struggled to beat the Texans last week. And, of course, we all know what happened in Seattle the week before that. So I'm going with the Niners. Jimmy Garoppolo right now, to me, is the better quarterback in this game. I hate to say that. It's kind of funny to say. But I think the Niners, 1.5, I'm going with the Niners on the road here to win this game. So, Robert?
Here's what I'll say about the Broncos. We all know a legendary offensive coordinator named Paul Hackett. Now, I don't know who his wife is, but Mr. and Mrs. Hackett made a mistake when they named their son. They should have named him Can't Hackett, because this guy stinks as a head coach. This guy doesn't belong anywhere near a head coaching position in this league, and he's proven it 2 weeks in, just terrible. I don't know what this guy's doing. So, for that reason, I'm picking the Niners. Jimmy G, I think, he probably got a little chip on his shoulder with how the Niners have approached him, and obviously they view Trey Lance as the guy coming in the season. Trey Lance, busts his ankle, he's done. And so enter Jimmy G. And I think, he's obviously going to be motivated to play well. And the Niners have a good team. I actually think with Jimmy G at the helm, it improves their chances, this season. And I think that with that defense, they got a pretty good defense there, dynamic offense. I think that they can, really impress some team. I think that this spread, honestly, is dumb. The Broncos haven't shown us anything in the first 2 weeks. I don't care if they have Russell Wilson at quarterback. I don't care if they have a clone of John Elway. It doesn't matter. With Can't Hackett at the helm, this team stinks. So give me the Niners. Give me any team against the Broncos for the rest of the season. They're a bunch of bums.
Go ahead, Justin. Who do you like?
I feel bad for Nathaniel Hackett because I get like he's got Syracuse ties. Obviously, he's got Bills ties. Robert knows him well from back when he was calling plays for the Bills, or he was a coordinator with the Bills. You want a dog on the guy as a coach or a head coach. Hey, fine. There's a lot of stuff that goes into being a head coach that doesn't involve calling plays or running an effective offense. It's much more of a administrative position than probably a lot of people realize. But let's not forget Nathaniel Hackett somehow led an offense quarterbacked by Blake Bortles to an AFC championship game. Okay. Let's not forget that he was the offensive coordinator for a Green Bay team that was dead in the water before he showed up. Now, obviously he's not calling plays, but I'm telling you, as the Packers fan, he had a big part in why they were so good over the last 3 years, and particularly the last two. Aaron Rodgers is not an easy guy to please. I think we all know that. And he loved Nathaniel Hackett. So the guy knows something about offensive football. He doesn't know much about situational football at the moment, it would seem, which is really what's dooming that Broncos team. But here's what I'll say. I think it's crazy to say, as much as I don't necessarily like him as a quarterback, and while that he has not lit the world on fire the last couple of weeks, to say that Jimmy Garoppolo is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson, I think is insane. I'm
saying right now, at this point, I'm saying right now. Okay, I'm not saying
I repeat, I think that's an insane take. Like, we're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, okay? Like, the Niners fell ass backwards into him coming back as their starter because he was hurt. He had a bum shoulder. They couldn't get rid of him. But I mean, they tried their hardest to just get this guy out of the building, and for one reason or another, we're not successful. But I think, we're forgetting what kind of quarterback he is. Like, there's a reason they traded their draft capital for 3 years to get Trey Lance, is because Jimmy G is very limited. So, and on top of that, this 49ers offensive line is excellent at left tackle. And then they have a bunch of janitors along the rest of the line. So, do I think that the 49ers with him at the helm, there's a level they can reach, a level of, I'm struggling for the word I'm looking for, but you kind of know what you're getting with Jimmy G, for better or worse. I'm sure as Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, they're probably happy about this because, at least he'll get them the ball. But he's going to make a brain fart or two. And if there's one thing I know about Russell Wilson, he's better at taking care of the ball. And don't forget about this. He knows that San Francisco defense, and that's a defense that he has performed pretty well against over the years. So, Broncos are home, I believe. They're getting points as the home team. I guess I'll roll with Denver. Again, another game I don't feel spectacular about, but yeah, I'll go with Denver.
Okay. All right. So now we'll do our takeaways from last week. And for me, it is the comebacks. I mean, you know, with the Dolphins that we've discussed, what the Cardinals did against the Raiders, we've discussed. And then, of course, to me, the worst one of them all is the Browns and the Jets last week. The way that the Browns, you know, they go out by 13, they miss the extra point, could have been 14. And then the ultimate, not only did they give up the long touchdown pass, they failed to recover the onside kick and then let the Jets go right down the field again and score the winning touchdown. So that's more egregious than you know, blowing a 2-touchdown lead in the last 2 minutes. To me, is more egregious than blowing a 21-point lead at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And then, like I said, the Raiders, what they did wasn't good either. But still, so I think the fact that you've got these you know, you never can count a team out now. I mean, I think every team realizes that, hey, even though we're up 2-3 touchdowns, you got to play hard. You got to play smart. Time management. I've always said that, you know, I think NFL teams need a coach just to be, you know, managing the clock to help out the head coach and everything. And in certain situations, I think you need a time management coach to say, look, you know, this is what we need to do here. I mean, look what happened last night with the Browns and the Steelers. Much to Robert and I's chagrin, that you know, if the Browns had gone for it on 4th and inches, if you know, if they had done something a little bit differently, the game would have turned out differently at the end there. So you know, it's just, you just never know what's going to happen with the NFL. It's kind of what makes it the best thing in pro sports altogether. And you know, so Justin, what are your takeaways from last week in the NFL?
Oh, Chris, you spent more time talking about the Jets in the last 2 minutes than we probably spent in the last 5 years. I mean, it's been a relevant team, you know, but hey, good for them. It couldn't have happened to a greater team, right, Browns? Freaking clowns. I want to focus in on the AFC West, because I think rightfully so, that division just top to bottom looked like the best division in the NFL, between the level of quarterback that each team had and the defensive additions that some of the teams made. You know, the Raiders added Chandler Jones, Chargers got Khalil Mack, you know, just and they added J.C. Jackson. Just a lot of excitement around that division. And you know, we're seeing kind of I don't want to say they're not living up to the hype, but we're really seeing like these teams beat up on each other. They're losing stupid games, and it's just opening the door for the Bills to get that top seed in the AFC. I mean, the Chargers lost Thursday night. They were my Super Bowl pick that I changed to. They lose a game that honestly I think they outplayed the Chiefs. I think they look like a better team and a more talented team. But you throw an untimely interception that gets returned 100 yards, and that swings the game in the Chiefs' favor. And now Justin Herbert is hurt. Who knows if he's going to play this week, and who knows if he's going to be impacted by this rib injury for the next few games. But then you talk about the Raiders, an 0-2 team that people were excited about. I wasn't. I picked them to finish last in the division. I didn't believe in that roster as a whole, and I think Derek Carr is overrated. And listen, you're throwing the ball and only connecting to Devontae Adams twice in an entire game. I'm sorry, but that's like, even Brett Hundley wasn't that bad back when he was throwing to Devontae Adams. So, and I think we're forgetting a little bit that Josh McDaniels, while he's a very effective offensive coordinator, there's no evidence that he's a good head coach. So I think the excitement around the Raiders was a little weird to begin with, and they haven't exactly proven me wrong so far. And then we've already talked about the strangeness that's going on with Denver. So I think in terms of excitement level, that AFC West has certainly lived up to the billing. But, you know, there were some takes out there that all four of these teams are going to make the playoffs. It wasn't a common take, but it was out there if you looked hard enough, and I just don't see it. So it's going to probably come down to the Chiefs are going to win it again just because they're not the ones stubbing their toe every other week. But I do like if the Chargers, if they can get Herbert back and he's healthy for most of the season, I think they have a really good team, and that's going to be appointment television again whenever they're facing the Chiefs again.
Robert, your thoughts on week 3?
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts. One is, the Giants starting 2-0. This is a team that, I don't think they've had, impressive wins by any means, but they've, you're winning in the NFL, and it's the first time they've started 2-0, and I forget, it was a crazy number of years. It's wild. But they seem to be on the right track. Brian Daboll at head coach. There's a lot of Bills influence in that team. And so it definitely seems like early on they've really changed the culture there. They had, after the Coughlin years, they had a bunch of losers go through there and really dismantle that team. And the jury's still out on Daniel Jones, and we'll see what happens at quarterback. But hey, they're winning games. Again, not the most impressive wins by any means, but a win's a win in the NFL, and to be 2-0, especially in that division. You've got the Cowboys with their situation. The commies, look like trash. You've got the Eagles that are playing pretty good. Who knows? The Giants make a run here. I think they still have to win some games in their division, but we'll see what happens. Could make the playoff race a little interesting. And then the other thing, just kind of looking at the NFC, we kind of talked about this in our season preview, but it just seems like none of these teams are really that impressive. The Cardinals, they needed to come back against the Raiders. Obviously the Cowboys with their situation. The 49ers, won against the Seahawks, but we know where they're at. And then the Rams almost blew it against the Falcons of all teams. So, it's tough to really, look at the NFC and say, yeah, there's a clear cut, Super Bowl contender here. But, the one thing I'll say, I'll give, credit to Ritz's Packers. I think that if they can keep doing what they did against the Bears, not asking, Rodgers to do a whole hell of a lot, to go out there, sling it like he does, build that rapport with your receivers, use those running backs, because Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon that's quite a two-headed monster. And, they can do some damage against opposing defenses. That's a team to watch, I think, in the NFC. I'm not going to say, I'm not going to change my pick or anything here. But I will say that, I think if they keep that recipe going, it can be one for success, especially with how a lot of those teams in the NFC are looking right now, how these injuries play out. We'll see how long the Eagles can keep, smacking teams around. But, keep an eye on the Packers, because if they can keep the ball rolling there, I think they may have something.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap it up?
I'm surprised, and maybe I've overlooked this myself, but none of us want to talk about the defending AFC champions are 0-2 and just lost a game to Cooper Rush.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on with the Bengals? So,
The offensive line, they can't pass protect. I mean, it's funny because that's all people talked about was, well, the Bengals completely revamped their offensive line, so boom, pencil them in for another Super Bowl. Well, I think any of us who know is offensive lines, we just don't put a bunch of guys together and boom, they're a perfect unit. It takes time to develop, the word I'm looking for, synergy, synchronicity. I mean, the gel and everything. I mean, you can have, all the talent in the world, but if they don't play together as a unit, you're going to have issues and everything. So, and I get that the Bengals defense is not that great either, but still, I think it's just everybody thinks that it's like a football video game that you just get all these all-stars or get all these all-pro great players together. Next thing you know, boom, you're off to the races, and it doesn't work that way. It takes time to develop chemistry. It could be coaching. There's a lot of things going on here. So I think it's just the offensive line more than anything else.
I don't want to toot my own horn too much. It's only 2 weeks, but you know who wasn't a believer in the Bengals?
You were.
Well,
Okay.
I think even Jamar Chase said, that, you notice that teams are defending them a little differently. One of the hallmarks of the Bengals last season were these big plays, and Jamar Chase made a bunch of them. But now, teams know what to expect against him. T. Higgins, what Joe Burrow, wants to do, and I mean that team has not looked good in 2 weeks. In the first 2 weeks here, I was able to see some of that game against the Cowboys, and it was just like, how do you lose to a team with a backup quarterback at the helm? They look nothing like last year's team, and it seems like they, to what Jamar Chase has been saying, like they haven't made those adjustments, and that's where you get in the territory. Well, who's that on ultimately? That's on the coach. That's on Zach Taylor, and that's where it's like, well, do you look at Zach Taylor's shiny 2021 year, or do you look at, how much the Bengals stunk before that, and how long does he stick around there?
Well, I think Joe Burrow, you got to not point the finger, but we got to highlight that he's part of this issue too. His version of quarterbacking reminds me a lot, and this isn't going to be a compliment, but young Aaron Rodgers, in terms of he holds the ball so long, like he will hold that ball to the last possible second before throwing it away. And that's why he takes sacks. Like it's not always on the offensive line just stinking. Like sometimes you have to overcome that and get the ball out in less than 2.5 seconds. And it took Aaron Rodgers, who let's remember, when he was holding the ball, he was just taking the sack. He wasn't throwing the ball up for grabs and throwing dumb interceptions, which is kind of what Joe Burrow does sometimes. You can't take bad sacks and throw the ball up for interceptions. It's got to be one or the other. I'd much rather, if Joe Burrow's going to get hit and he's going to hold the ball, then hold on to it and just take the sack, take the loss of 10 yards and live to fight another day. But, to play hero ball sometimes, it's not a long-term recipe for success. So, get the ball out quicker. And this is where Zach Taylor needs to play a role, because he's the one calling plays. Emphasize that. Hey, get the ball out in 2.5 seconds. You have receivers who can get open quickly. So let's play a little more quick passing instead of waiting for the deep shot every time. So, I don't think their season is doomed by any stretch of the imagination. I did pick them to be a wild card team in the AFC, and I think there's still a road for that. But, Burrow needs to adjust his game a little bit, because teams are not going to allow those big plays to the frequency they did last year.
All right. We'll wrap it up with this. Syracuse plays tonight against Virginia. JMA Wireless Dome. There, I said it again. And Syracuse is off to I would say, a surprising 3-0 start. I think that, a lot of people didn't think they were going to beat Louisville week 1 and didn't think they were going to maybe Purdue in week 3. But they're going up against the Cavaliers there at the University of Virginia, and they are a 10-point favorite. Of course, you can't bet on the game here in New York, but just shows you that, this team is starting to come around. And, if they get 4 wins, they're not going to run the tape on us. They're going to lose to Clemson. They're going to lose to Wake Forest. They're going to lose to Florida State probably. But, there are some other winnable games there. They could beat Notre Dame. They could beat Wake Forest, Boston College, Pitt. I mean, there's a path there where they could finish 8-4 in the regular season. And if they go 8-4, they're going to go to a halfway decent bowl game, which would be a nice little reward for these guys that have, like I said, they've had some tough years recently, and I think it'd be kind of good to see them get back to a halfway decent, point where they're going to halfway decent bowl games and not like these toilet bowl games. So, but we'll see. They got to win tonight. We'll see how it goes from there. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the football, and be safe out there. And we'll see you next week.